This is a huge change, and a lot of people are expecting leaders to just know exactly what to do and how to do it and to always get it right. Change takes time, and a leader has to help themselves change while they're helping their organization change. That's what I mean when I say mutuality, is this sense that we're in this together, but we're not just looking for our own preference, or we're not just looking to get our own work done. We're seeing how our work interacts with other people. Like, what kind of work do we actually do? What do our clients and business partners and everything, what do they need from us? Flexible work or hybrid work is like money. It makes you more of who you are.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to season 2 of the Heroes of Hybrid Work. On today's pod, we welcome Elizabeth Knox, former program manager and principal leader at CSRA, the premier provider of high-tech next-gen IT solution services to the Department of Defense, the intelligence community, and federal civilian agencies as they modernize their information systems. That's not a mouthful. Today, Elizabeth is the founder of MatchPace, which I believe is about 6 years old now. And it's an organizational effectiveness consulting firm where she's focused on helping leaders make hybrid work work. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us on the Heroes of Hybrid Work today.
Jenny, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
You got it. So let's start with, tell us a little bit about your background and your story of how you came about founding MatchPace.
So I am originally from Pennsylvania, and I have been fortunate to have moved around the globe, well, the country and the globe, but I've called Washington, D.C. home for the last couple of decades. And my husband and I have 4 elementary aged children. We have an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and 2 8-year-olds. And it's because of my children, actually, that I started MatchPace. I didn't feel like I could parent in line with my values and be gone 50 to 60 hours a week, which was kind of what my career had required of me up until then. But I didn't just want to create something for myself to have a sustainable life. MatchPace's mission is all about creating more healthy and sustainable organizations for everybody so that everybody can do good work and have time for their other priorities.
I love that. So that seems very much in line with helping organizations with hybrid work, more flexible approaches to work for people of different backgrounds, moms, dads, people with disabilities, right? There's a wide range of folks that hybrid work helps. What got you interested in hybrid work?
Yeah, so I mean, it's exactly what you just said, that everybody has other priorities, right? And our jobs are really important, and they have a great opportunity to make a difference in the world. It's where we spend the majority of our waking hours. It's tied to our livelihood. A lot of us feel like we live some of our sense of purpose through our work. But all of those things combined can make work really dominant in our lives, and it squeezes out the things that are important to everybody: family, community, health. And so what we're trying to do through MatchPace and what we're trying to help organizations do is to capture that both, right? So how do we leverage people's professional skills and help solve the world's problems without grinding people to a nub so that it's hard for them to attend to other things that are important in their life?
I think what you're kind of stating and what we've, really come to know now is that the hybrid work debate is over. And what's happening now is how to help organizations actually implement it in order to retain talent and be a thriving and effective organization, especially for knowledge workers who tend to be able to work from their homes or just need the internet. So a question for you. I particularly enjoyed your recent post on the 5 stages of hybrid. I believe your 11-year-old doctored it up for you on LinkedIn. I thought that was really cool. So you talked about going from denial to adaptation. So how can we help leaders, now that the hybrid work debate is kind of over, how can we help leaders move toward adaptation so that we can focus on the work again and not where we
Yeah,
work?
because the vehicle for all of this conversation about a more healthy and sustainable workplace is hybrid, right? So that's what organizations are willing to engage in right now. And for leaders, what kind of where I focus is one, with grace for themselves. This is a huge change. And a lot of people are expecting leaders to just know exactly what to do and how to do it and to always get it right. And change takes time, and a leader has to help themselves change while they're helping their organization change. And so that's where, when I'm working with executives directly, that's where we spend a lot of our energy. And then also just on their own personal growth and transformation. Again, to be able to live and walk through change and to be able to move beyond just kind of checking boxes and creating policies and hoping that those will solve the problems. It's really kind of healthy embodied leadership that helps an organization thrive. So that's kind of where the focus is when working with leaders on the transition to hybrid. It's less about the where and more about how they engage with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you think of an example of a leader, you know, and going through change and how, you know, their change impacted the organization for better or for worse?
I can almost give you a contrast of the tale of two leaders, you know, and so
Yeah,
one leader who was ready for that work, right? They understood that the world was changing. There was a pretty abrupt, you know, change with the start of the pandemic. But then since then, it's like, how do we operate in this new normal? And one leader really kind of got in touch with themselves, understood their own fears about this, understood what their clients needed, understood what their team needed, you know, worked through their own hesitations. And then another leader that I've worked with, they are they're willing to engage with kind of the checking the boxes, and they're willing to start to shift their organization, but their own heart hasn't changed. And I know that that sounds kind of soft, but it's actually a power skill to be able to engage in these problems with your whole self. And so it's kind of a tale of two leaders. One has really made a difference in the way their organization functions. And then the other one, it still feels kind of robotic. It doesn't feel authentic and genuine.
So what would you say to that robotic leader, in order to, you know, move their business forward?
So that's where sometimes, you know, where I feel like the limitations of my abilities, right? I can't wave a magic wand and make somebody want to take on these changes. And that doesn't diminish that they are doing some of the box checking and the creating the new policies, right? And so it may not feel like enough for their team. And, you know, I'm also like, I often find myself in the translator kind of role of helping what people often feel like they're on two sides, right? There's the leaders versus the employees. And really just kind of saying we're all on the same side. These are ways that we're moving forward. It may not be as far forward as you want, you know, but let's celebrate the wins. And then everybody's on a journey to evolve. And so I haven't given up on this person, right? I haven't said, oh, they're never going to change. They're never going to get it. They're going through their own things. And so, you know, continuing to engage and move them forward as much as they want to be moved forward, even without a magic wand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure there are folks that really struggle with this because they just didn't, for lack of a better word, grow up with it. And so, I mean, that's not the only reason, but I could see where there's a struggle and maybe a lack of trust sometimes. And can you talk a little bit about that? I know you've also posted that person not with their laptop on the ski hill. And can you speak a little bit to, you know, how do you build that trust with your employees so that you can be a leader that can move hybrid work forward?
So for anybody who's not connected with me on LinkedIn, I just posted a short of a person with their laptop open on the bottom of a ski hill, and it looked like they were in an engaged conversation. And you know, I made a joke of like, sorry, my Wi-Fi is not working today. I'm going to be off camera. But what I brought up was that there's actually, whichever way you slice it, there's kind of two problems there. Either this person isn't being honest, right? Which is a risk, you know, with people having more flexibility. You know, you need to have higher trust with them, or there's not trust in the other direction, that a person doesn't feel like they can genuinely take time off and they feel like they have to be connected when they're on a ski slope. And, you know, in an ideal world, it should be more outcome focused, right? If the person can get the work done, what does it matter? But that's kind of ignoring the trust that you're talking about. It's ignoring the social systems that we have of dynamics where, you know, maybe people aren't doing what they say they're doing. They're, you know, calling into a a call from Target, or maybe leaders don't actually let people disconnect. And so both groups of people need to understand we are in a new dynamic and it does take time to get there. And assuming that everybody should automatically be able to turn on the right skills or have the right social dynamics so that everybody can just be completely upfront. Like, we just need to acknowledge that that's not the reality and work towards the reality, instead of pretending that it's already there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's almost for me it's getting back to the basics. I mean, I think hybrid work is a layer that of the, the culture and the foundation of trust that already exists in the organization. So to me, hybrid work just makes it harder to maintain those foundations. So, if there isn't trust already, then, this person is trying to work on a ski slope. If there is already trust, then this person can take a vacation. And so that exists whether you're hybrid work
I
organization or not, correct?
have a little saying that flexible work or hybrid work is like money. It makes you more of who you are, right? So if your organization is already, has high trust, they are ready to adapt to challenges, like, then they can figure out flexible work. So it's kind of the idea of like, if you get more money, you're going to do similar things with it. But if you're already a low trust organization and people are phoning it in, whether they're in the office or not, people aren't coming in kind of with their engaged whole self, that's going to continue in flexible work. So it's just going to make you more of who you are. And then you want to examine who you are. And is this who you want your organization to be? Is this who you want your team to be? Is this who you want to be as a leader?
I love that. That's a really great way to think about it. Another thing that you've spoken about is kind of more the tactics behind, and I think season 2 of the podcast is going to focus a lot on how to help organizations actually get it right, right? So, speak to me a little bit about the hybrid cadences that you recommend for organizations. Like, how would an organization approach their hybrid cadence, and how
Yeah.
important is it to have
So
one?
as with most good answers, like, there is no one answer, of course. And probably the first thing I would say about a hybrid cadence, that's where kind of everybody's mind goes. They go to this, what I would call a downstream decision about, well, what days are we going to be in the office? Who's going to sit where? What kind of cadence are we going to have? And that is a downstream decision after you've done a lot of work to examine, like, what kind of work do we actually do? What do our clients and business partners and everything, what do they need from us? What does our, team require? And then you figure out a cadence. And so a lot of people just kind of want to figure out, it's like, well, everybody says 2 days a week is good, so we're going to do that. It's different for every organization. It's different for the people that you serve. It's different for different teams within organizations. There's a lot that shows that team level understandings and cadences make a lot more sense. And there's absolutely a place for kind of an enterprise cadence, right? Because sometimes people in the enterprise can see connections that other people can't see from where they are. And so I think it has the most to do with, knowing the type of work you do, knowing who your team is, knowing who your clients are. And then the cadence emerges out of that rather than starting with a cadence, which is unfortunately where the conversation tends to devolve to a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. So, for instance, I run a marketing team. There's creatives, right? And then there's analytical folks. And so, we take all the best practice that all the heroes of hybrid work have brought to us, and we say, which employees need a little more unstructured collaboration in person, brainstorming, which of us needs more time to get into the data and really dig in and get into the weeds, then who actually needs to be in person, who can be at home, and how much time do we need for bonding in person, over lunches and just random coffee chats over not. So I think I get that. I think it's really about working with your team to get to the right decision, and then the individuals in that team as well, because at least in marketing, right, it's just the
Mm-hmm.
behavioral profiles are vast
Mm-hmm.
now, right? It's not just creatives anymore. So that makes a ton of sense to me, and we'll be sure to
Oh,
share
thanks.
your
Thanks.
cadence graphic because it's really good. You're welcome. All right, so
Mhm.
you talk about mutuality. What does that mean, and
Mhm.
how can that help our
So
listeners
I
today?
brought this up earlier that it feels like a lot of people are walking into these conversations with their own interests in mind. And that makes sense, right? I mean, you know, we are, by nature kind of making sure that number one is taken care of. And at the same time, we're navigating things with other humans. And so that video that you referred to that my son edited for me, right? It was a little bit of a tongue in cheek of, we start out with everybody's an adult here, we can figure this out. And then we like devolve into demands and threats and boycotts and enforcing compliance and people doing the bare minimum, right? And so what I want is for people to figure out is to both realize and experience that you're on the same team. So hopefully you share a vision for your work, you share a commitment to a cause. And so when you hold that at the center of the conversation, that then you're accommodating each other. You're going to have to accommodate each other, right? That's just the reality of working with other people. Can you talk openly about policies or requests? And so that's what I mean when I say mutuality, is this sense that we're in this together and not just looking out for preferences are absolutely important, right? But we're not just looking for our own preference, or we're not just looking to get our own work done. We're seeing how our work interacts with other people. So I kind of beat that drum a lot about mutuality.
Excellent, excellent. Again, can you kind of bring that to life for us? Is there any example that might come to mind where you've seen it truly have an impact on an organization to have that kind of two-way, intentional kind of conversation?
With one client, they kind of, it has paralleled the journey to figure out a hybrid plan, right? At first, it was like everybody kind of knows what they need to do. It's not a big deal. And then they started to realize that wasn't working for them. And they got into the kind of bargaining or bribing phase of like, well, what if we have lunches, or what if we have this? And they had, like a lot of people, kind of opened up hiring to the entire nation, right? And they realized that wasn't working for them. And they had to make some hard decisions in terms of like, hey, everybody's first year with the organization needs to be within 50 miles of the organization. After that, people can move. Like, so they've made changes and they've explained their changes, and their team has largely understood their changes. And it means that people have to make decisions, right? You've got to decide if this works for you or not, but it's with the whole in mind. And so the organization has shifted more towards a sense of, it's not perfect, right? And they're still figuring that out, but by having open conversations about the realities of decisions that they've made, making new decisions, knowing that decisions aren't going to stay forever, has helped them have that mutuality.
So tell me a little bit about that 50-mile radius. So why is it so important that at that first year is more localized for them?
I think there's maybe the way things are going to be in the future, right? I know there's lots of people doing things with virtual reality and everything, but like we're just not there. And tech tools are amazing. You and I met on a tech tool, like on a tech platform. We connected through tech tools. And there's a reason why you didn't just send me these questions and have me answer them. There's something about a conversation. There's something about human connection. And we probably would have even had a different conversation if we had been in the same room. We would have talked a little bit more about our children. We would have gotten to know each other, and that greases the wheels of work, right? It's that, it makes work easier when you have connections with people. And so far, not everybody, but a lot of people make stronger connections, deeper connections in person. And so this organization said, we want to make sure that we have enough of that. And it was really hard with, well, some people were doing it, but some people lived in California, and, some people were doing it, but some people didn't, this didn't work for them. And the organization said, we want that flexibility. We're going to offer it as much as we can. And we feel like to get the good work done that we need to get done, we also need that in-person connection. And so they made a hard decision, which they're accepting. They are acknowledging the costs of it. They're accepting the costs of it. And this is what works for them now.
Awesome. That was a good example. So speaking of technology, and I don't know how much you want to speak to technology, but you did write about the top technology traps in a hybrid work environment. So I'm wondering, what would be the best advice you could give our listeners on these traps and how to avoid them?
There's the classic ones like data security, right? Or interoperability between different tools. And I think probably if anybody's been listening this far, they're going to realize like where I'm going to land is over-reliance on tech tools. So we know all about the meeting that should have been an email, right? That's such a catchphrase. but there are plenty of Slack exchanges that should have been a conversation. And so when we rely too heavily on tech tools, it diminishes the work. And so
100%.
there's kind of the tech sides of tech tools of like, make sure they actually work together, that, your tools talk to each other, but then also make sure your people talk to each other, because that can solve problems easier sometimes.
100%. There was this great image that was trending the other day that was, if you have a problem and you try to do it through chat, like all the myriad like mazes that you go through, and then if you would just have gotten on the phone, it would be like a straight shot. Just like just have the conversation. I tell my team all the time, if you're really having a challenge, get off of chat and just have the 10-minute, 5 to 10 minute face-to-face conversation. It will save so much time in your day. It'll save on miscommunications, even on tone, right? Because you hear the tone you want to hear when someone is chatting with you, and you have literally no idea what their tone is. So
Totally, 1,000%. And if you think about how we work, it makes our days so fractured, right? You're managing 3 or 4 different conversations in a messaging tool, and you can't remember, who am I talking to right now? And by the way, I needed to write a whole paragraph, and it's like, so that conversation that would have taken 5 to 10 minutes voice to voice ends up taking 4 hours out of your day because you're doing it in and amongst other things.
exactly. We really still haven't figured out this right balance, or, between chat and text and talk and live, and asynchronous and synchronous is what we call it. So I know we're hitting up against time here. One question I love to ask every guest is, what did I miss? I asked you questions that maybe didn't get to the juice of exactly what you wanted to say today. Is there anything that you came here wanting to say that maybe I didn't ask the right question?
I think we hit on so many of them, and so it's been really great to talk. I think the one thing, if I can like really drive home for people, is that we are at a moment right now where we have the potential and opportunity to reimagine how we work. And so I don't want that to get lost in arguments. I really want us to think about how we can transform how work mixes with our whole lives, how we can still solve major problems in the world, and kind of have this new relationship with work and our lives, so that we can be more integrated, so that we can be more holistic. And so I think that's where I would really capture the like, let's not lose this moment that we have to really reimagine what we're doing.
Elizabeth, how can people get in touch with you?
I love the conversations that happen on LinkedIn. So I'm linkedin.com/Elizabeth Knox. I think I got that one, or Elizabeth@MatchPace.net.
Excellent. All righty. Well, thank you so much again for joining us today. This was a lovely conversation. It was wonderful to meet you.